This video is going to cover everything from doing a turbo replacement to replacing the fuel filter on the Audi. I did a bunch of work to it in the span of about 5-6 days. So I'm just going to throw everything into one video. Just going to start using this as a platform to document the builds, whether it's doing stuff with the Audi. I got the 240 and the Mustang. This thing's a maybe. It's a 59 Austin Healey. I might be doing a full restoration on that, but I'm not 100% sure yet. But this is just going to be a really good way for me to document my builds, and I'm using it as a means to track my progress personally, whether it's through just mechanics or fabrication, body work, paint, whatever. I got a lot of things planned, a lot of things that I want to get knocked out. I'll make a separate video explaining what the Rapture Spec channel is, what the name is going to mean going forward. But to those of you who already know, I cannot thank you guys enough for the support that you've already shown with this idea. I am beyond stoked to work with you guys and keep going with these concepts that we've had. It's just going to be really cool to have that unique street presence just among our own builds that nobody else is going to have. I cannot wait to see these parts going on your guys' cars. That's going to be an incredible feeling. With that being said, it's time to get into what I actually did on this thing over that few day span. We will be starting with a very quick snub out replacement. I'd say we're in a little bit better shape now, boys. This thing's pretty chewed up. But I got that nice new brand spanking sumbitch in there now. It's gonna be a little more effective than this. As you can see, I went ahead and cut that edge off, and that should give us plenty of clearance. Probably about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch that we really needed. And it was more so that point just digging into the actual downpipe, so that'll alleviate that point of stress there, and we should be good to go. I'm gonna show you guys a real quick fix. I wasn't able to find any sort of OE style pins that I could repin a connector with. My issue was my coolant level sensor on the actual reservoir. The wires pulled out of that connector. I don't know if I threw the pins away along with that connector or what I did with them, but I wasn't able to find them. I opted to use slide pins, and those will just slide right over the connector. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about, but it's a real quick fix. And if anybody else is struggling finding OE style pins out there, it's not really worth the time looking into it. I searched for a couple hours and couldn't find anything. So instead of wasting more time, this fix seemed to be, just as efficient. It's not gonna be 100% factory, but it will work for the situation. Instead of using the OE connector, what I did was just threw a couple of these slide pins on. I'm going to solder both of them and then heat shrink up to the bottom there. Essentially, those will just slide right over instead of using the factory connector. Went ahead, threw a little bit of solder on those bad boys just to hold them in place a little more secure. So now that's taken care of. A little quick update here. I was letting the phone charge so I didn't get the footage, but I went ahead and got the downpipe bolted onto the turbo, torqued that down, and it's easier to get this bolt when the turbo's off of the car, not mounted to the manifold. You can actually get a wrench in there, turn it, get it tight, and then I was able to fish the turbo with the downpipe already attached to it down in there. So main thing you have to do is loosen up the turbo bracket here. You got to get it to where it's movable, and then you can take the whole assembly, slide it down in there. Best way to get to that bolt right there is to come down through here. I just used I believe it's a 6 mil. I'll double check that with the swivel, and that 6 mil is an Allen. So swivel extension, get it up in there through the bottom here. That's the easiest way to access it. Now that I've got the turbo installed, I'm going to go ahead and finish tightening those manifold bolts down. I'm going to tighten that bracket back down, get the bracket attached to the actual turbo there, and then we can start hooking the rest of the lines up and start finalizing this side. Got the turbo bracket just very loosely, got that threaded in there, got that started. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten that one down. Same with that. After I get these manifold bolts up, get those torqued. Only other thing I have to do is I have to hook up this coolant line that runs into the block there, and I believe this is an 8, I want to say an 8 mil hex for this. I'll double check just to be sure. As I was going to bolt back this coolant supply line for the turbo, I noticed we got a little bit of crackage there. So that definitely would have been a failure point very soon. I'm sure this is the original coolant supply line. So we're going to go ahead, hit up FCP, get one of these bad boys on order, and we will not have to deal with that coolant leak. Next plan of attack is going to be getting the two 10mm bolts on the wastegate bracket so I can move that out of the way and then get to this 8 mil hex back here that is the other side of that supply line. So I'll go ahead and get that off and pull this hose out and get ready for the new one. To get to that coolant line, all I did was loosen up those two 10mm bolts that held on the wastegate bracket there, and then I just used, it's either 8 mil or you can throw a 3/8 on there, and I used a 3/8 wrench because it's a ratchet end. So it's got the socket in there, a little bit of ratcheting. We'll work this thing out and we'll be good to go. Got that coolant line out. Didn't have that bad boy in. There'd be a bolt going through this little hole in the bracket there that would secure the coolant line with that bracket. After that, it's just really a matter of throwing the whole front end back on it. I've got it laying over here. Be able to slap the core support on, and then I'll go ahead and throw the bumper on and we'll be good to go. I took some of the lines off, some of the hoses, and just kind of cleaned things up. They were pretty damn grimy. I'm sure it's years of shit that's been caked on there. So I went ahead, kind of just gave them a quick soap and water cleaning, rinsed them off. And then here is the 034 Motorsport turbo inlet. Super stoked on this thing. Had to wait just due to some production delays. But, you know, shit happens. All that matters is I got it here now, and we can go ahead and get things thrown back together and get the car back on the road. Helps to get the right angle. Now that I got them drilled down, I'm going to go ahead and take either a flap wheel or probably just the wire brush to them, clean them up a little bit. Don't need anything too crazy, just get the shavings off of them, get them cleaned up, get the surface rust off, and they'll be good enough. I sanded these down and just gave them a real quick clear coat. I'll probably do one more layer on it just to give it a little bit of protection, and we'll call those good. I'll be able to slip the bolt through the rubber hanger, which is this big old meaty bastard, and then we'll slap them on. You got the boys over there taking a nap. They've been busy supervising, they're all worn out. Tough day, huh, bud? Tough day. Another little side note, for the fuel filter, you will need a 12.8 millimeter hex bit. Here's what that 12.8 mil looks like up close. And I just got it in this little cobalt kit from Lowe's. The thing's pretty crusty, so I hit it with a little bit of WD-40. And I also took a 90-degree pick. Wherever the hell it went. Took this 90-degree pick, and it helps to get up in there and just kind of run it around to break the rust out and help clean that up a little bit, especially with any kind of T-bit or Allen bolt, anything like that. It's always good to get the rust out of there. Helps you get a better grip on it and a lot less likely to strip those out. Those real small splines in there. Got the new fuel filter ready to go. When it comes to replacing it, it's going to be on the rear passenger side in front of the subframe mount right up against the tank. So what you're going to do is loosen this up. It's just the banjo bolt to the bottom. So loosen that up. This one's a little crusty, just had to give it a little oomph to get it broken loose. And then that M8 bit, that 8 millimeter 12-point hex, is for that bolt up there, which is a band around the fuel filter that holds it in place. So once that is loose, you can slide it down after you disconnect this banjo bolt here, and then you'll be able to access the top one as well. Got that bottom banjo bolt disconnected. So now I can go ahead, pull down on this bad boy. And that grants you access to the top. So now it's just a matter of removing this banjo and then slapping the new one on. Got the new filter on. So it's just a reverse process. Start with your top, and then we'll slide it up in. Now it's in, just make sure this lip is grabbing on the filter, and then you can go ahead and we'll get this bolt back in, and then get this bottom banjo bolt on, and then we are done with the fuel filter. I moved on to pulling the combi valve, which is bad boy. 3 bolts holds it in right next to the coolant flange there. I'm going to pull this coolant flange and check out that oil leak. I just want to see what the deal is there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that coolant flange off. I believe, yeah, there should be 10 mils. There's 2 or 3 that hold on the flange itself, and then there's also 2 10 mils holding on the supply pipe, one up top. Yeah, you can kind of see them. This will give more of a general idea where that second one's at. You can see where I've got the socket on it there. So it is just the one upper and one lower to get this part of the coolant pipe unbolted. So that bad boy will just pop out of place. The rubber O-ring fell down, so I'll have to fish that out. I gotta pull this vacuum line off real quick, and then I'll be able to pull this whole unit out of there. Got the coolant pipe out now, so I'm going to go ahead and get the coolant flange unbolted and pull that out as well. Remember, kids, safety third. I'm about to go cut out the little patch plate, little block off plate. So I'm using just 1/8 inch mild steel. I'm gonna get that cut out and we'll roll from there. And I got the general shape scribed in there, and then I just kind of trace over it with the Sharpie to get my rough dimension there. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this out. Alright, I marked my 3 holes out. I'm now going to take the 1/8 inch drill bit, make my pilot hole, and then I'm going to finish it off with this 7/32 bit. Here's how that block off plate turned out. I got 3 new bolts, 3 new washers for it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get it installed. Alright, block off plate is in, and it turned out pretty, oh, let me get a shot of it there. Pretty damn good. I'm happy with it, so I'm going to go ahead, throw the coolant flange back on, get the coolant pipe hooked up, and then let's see what's left. I got the coolant line on, that's tight. So I guess the next step is going to be getting the wastegate bolts back in. on the bracket there, 210 mils. I just got the coolant flange installed, so now everything back there is good to go. Was installed both O2s. I got the intake back in, I got the turbo inlet on, I got the coolant hose running to the turbo. What else we got? I need to get some vacuum line. I need to get a couple of vacuum plugs. Fast forward a bit, I got some stuff knocked out. I ended up replacing some vacuum lines. I got the N75 valve back in there. New hoses on that. I've got that plugged off, that port as well. I need to get a 3/4 inch expansion plug to fill that hole in the intake. That's also capped off along with that. And that was running to the combi valve, which was mounted there. I ended up running a new vacuum line going from the diverter valve to under the intake there. What else? I got the front cover back on. I threw a new coolant hose, new piece there, so that's good to go. Last thing is just double check the torque on the turbo to manifold bolts there, and then I'm about ready to get the front end back on, get oil and coolant in it, and start this thing up. Something else I'm going to do real quick, I'm going to cut this bracket so I can mount the accumulator there and just have it bolted back in place. So basically all I'm going to do is chop it off straight down, and then I'll be able to bolt the accumulator here, and these two mounts go to the chassis there, so that'll be secured. Now that I got this bracket cut out, I'm going to go ahead, hit it with a little bit of spray paint, and then I'll be able to throw it back on the car and bolt the accumulator to it. Now that I got a fresh coat on the accumulator bracket there, I'm going to go ahead and let that dry out. And I'm going to move on and start getting the front end put back on. Got the front end mocked up here. I went ahead and got my oil cooler lines hooked up. Got that connector there. Plugged in the headlights. I tucked the secondary air injection connector right here. Just a 2-pin. Just got that tucked away since I'm no longer utilizing that. Kind of same thing on this side. Got the lights hooked up. Got the horn hooked up. I'm going to get the hood latch set in there. you can tell by the video that this thing is smoking like a chimney. I've got some oil going past the seals on the new used turbo that I got to replace the stock one. Turns out that thing shot. It did have some chaff play in it already, so I was kind of expecting it to be a little bit iffy, but I didn't think that it would be shot before I could even get this thing out of the garage. But it is what it is. The plan is to get a KO4 on order. I'm still doing a little bit of research and figuring out which one I want to go with, but I will be installing a KO4. I'm going to keep it at the stock boost level. I'm not going for any sort of power gain with it. It'll give me a little bit of an advantage as far as not falling off up top like the KO3 does, but I'm not shooting for like 300 horse out of this thing by any means. So we're just going to get the KO4 swapped in and then get this thing running like a top again, and we'll go from there. Maybe down the road I'll have a little bit of room to push it if I want to do that, but with the way that this thing's been since I've had it, I just want to get it running good, and power right now is my really the last thing on my mind. Whether it's in the next video I upload or within the next couple, I will have the KO4 install, and I can do a little more in-depth of what it takes to swap the turbo on this thing. All in all, it's not that bad. I think that about wraps it up for now. But like I said, I'll have a video on doing the whole KO4 swap on this thing. I'll look forward to getting that in and finally getting this thing back on the road. And then this thing should be good to go for quite some time after all the maintenance that I just did to it, and we'll see. We shall see.